charges were later dropped. It's an interesting situation. How far would you go to protect your home and your family? Joseph Kotrie Monson is director at Kotrie Monson Solicitors, with us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Where does the law stand on this as to, how much force we can use if someone breaks into our property?
Well, let me first say that I'm so pleased that I've been asked to appear on this radio station, because so often when we hear these arguments about what the law says and the law being balmy and you can't protect your castle as an Englishman, most of that we're fed consistently in the tabloids and in the lower-end media is simply false. The reality is that you can use reasonable force, and reasonable force is dictated by the circumstances. So if a burglar is in your house with a knife and you have a kitchen knife and you do something, which of course I wouldn't recommend to anybody, the reality is that the law will protect you because you'll be judged by a sensible set of jurors. People like the same people listening to this radio station or the same people reading those newspapers.
How do we know, though, if it's not obvious, whether the other person is armed with a knife or other form of weapon? I mean, how do we stand then?
Well, there's a classic phrase in a very old murder case that judges talk that in a judgment in the Court of Appeal, where a judge says you can't blame somebody for acting in the agony of the moment. If somebody threatens because they're in their house and particularly concerned that they're under threat of danger, gets something wrong, the reality is that a CPS, prosecution service reviewing lawyer, and indeed a jury will be sympathetic. The point is that these are not legal questions. The law drafts it very widely as far as what's reasonable, so juries and normal people can make their mind up so that people are well protected. So there's always that human element to the judgment. It's not prescribed by law. The reality is it's what reasonable force is. And what reasonable force is the type of thing that you or I would regard as appropriate in the circumstances, not what a bunch of what most people would, what British public might be concerned are dyed-in-the-wool, out-of-touch judges might decide.
And of course, there is outrage, isn't there, where we find that people have been prosecuted for defending their own property. Do you think that's changing now? Do you think the attitudes are that we are more carefully looking at the fact that they did use a reasonable amount of force to evict the intruder?
As a defence lawyer, you will hear me as a defence lawyer say something rather controversial and against my own instincts now, which is that actually, generally speaking, the CPS prosecuting lawyers and the barristers who make these decisions get the decision right. They use their judgment, they consider whether it's in the public interest, and often these prosecutions don't even take place. What we have instead is a load of scaremongering and a climate of fear which is actually not established by the real situation of how people live in this country, more to do with what the tabloids and the low-end media want us to believe.
You felt, let's take the situation, because we've also talked on the programme this morning about the fear, the fact that somebody was in bed and people were trying to break into her home, and the fear that then led to, to deter them, she then switched all the lights on. What if you got somebody actually in your home and you confront that person? If they don't seem violent towards you, are you allowed to be violent towards them?
I know where you're going here, but let's look at the facts. This person's in your home. You or I are making the decision on a jury, or you or I are using that human element of judgment as the prosecuting lawyer. What do you or I say when we look at that situation?
We say they shouldn't be in my home and I want to get them out.
Yeah, and I think that's what those same people making those same decisions would.
Do you think the law is on the side of the homeowner, the property owner now?
I think, generally speaking, it's on the side of justice in respect of this argument. I think if people go too far, I think if someone's in your garden and you go out and take a gun to them or a baseball bat, I think any right-minded citizen would say, well, this raises an eyebrow, this needs to be investigated. We don't want vigilantism. At the same time, I think that people, generally speaking, well protected in the home, despite what the press may say.
So there's a difference then, in some respects, to coming into your garden, coming onto your land for whatever reason, and to actually physically breaking into your home?
It's a question of fact and degree. Is it at night? Is it in your house? These are the types of questions that somebody might ask. These are the types of questions that you or I would ask when we might be deciding whether somebody is a trespasser and whether you're reasonably in fear of danger. But again, the jury a prosecuting lawyer would be very sympathetic if you'd made a mistake because of fear. If you get a gun out because someone comes up your front door, I think that nobody would want that type of inappropriate vigilante to go unpunished.
Joseph, nice to talk to you this morning. Joseph Kotrie Monson, Director at Mary Monson Solicitors. So where